always, so today's
This meeting
topics.
is being recorded.
Oh, okay. So today's topics are behavior goal if checked in section 2, LRE for guided study hall, observation for record review, and then we added the alternate assessment testing window, just when the testing window is in the spring. And we'll probably be putting just a little bit more out in our newsletter, but we wanted to put that in since, oh my gosh, it's already November. So anyhow, we will go ahead with the next slide.
Right.
Dee Dee, did you want to take this or did you want me to take this?
Go ahead, you can, Helen.
Okay, if the special instructional factors box for behavior which impedes learning or the learning of others is checked, does there always have to be a behavioral goal? Or if the team is not presently addressing behavior as a goal, but providing accommodations and there's a justification for this in the profile, is that okay? And we're going on questions that we have received recently from phone calls and emails too. So this is coming up again. So with that being said, quite honestly, if you have a behavior that you are indicating in section 2 that adversely impacts the student's learning, but can be supported through accommodations and interventions, that don't require a goal, you are showing that without these supports and services, the behavior would impede the student's progress. However, you're explaining that the behavior that affects the student, that you're providing a rationale for not having a goal, and you're fine. So this information is important to include for the students, since there is often a withdrawal from learning activities that require some form of intervention. So basically, you don't always have to have a goal. If you can address the behavior through accommodations and you're providing that rationale, then you're fine. Now, we have had some recent emails or questions where probably because of some significant change in the child's behaviors, there should be a behavior goal and a BIP and sometimes an FBA. So if you really get into those challenging issues that can cause concern for moving the students into a more restricted environment or whatever, make sure you have done your due diligence and
Turn it over to Maria, you said?
Pardon? I think somebody's not muted. Sorry. So what I was saying, just make sure when you're doing, you can definitely not have to have a behavior goal addressed. Great if you can do accommodations and interventions, but if things are getting worse or you have more considerable issues before you get to the point where you don't have documentation of a behavior plan or a goal, make sure that you do have those in place before things do get out of hand. And I kind of got off topic there. This is correct, but we have had some recent calls where maybe they're looking for a more restricted environment and parents are pushing back because there hasn't been a BIP or a goal in place. So just, proceed with caution. Dee Dee, if you have anything to add to that, that's fine. But because we've had a few calls lately where there hasn't been, and the behaviors have gotten considerably worse. I just want to make sure people are looking at the full scope of the behavior.
Yeah, that's a good point, Helen. Here's the general rule of thumb, everyone. If you're talking about acting out behavior,
right,
then you need to have a behavior goal. Bottom line, if the student's behavior is aggressive in any way,
right,
and it's acting out, then there should be a behavior goal in the IEP. But what this question was, if you've got a student who withdraws and shuts down, and they're not throwing chairs in the room, they're not flinging things on the floor, or being physical in any way. It's more an internalizing way, where they are withdrawing from learning activities and that kind of thing. Then if you have things in place, and again, which is what we're saying, as long as you're providing the rationale, make sure you explain it thoroughly in the profile of how you're meeting that behavior need. And so it does not require a goal, because the student is doing well, they're functioning, there's not a problem, because you've put XYZ in place for them through accommodations or through your specially designed instruction or whatever it is, then you're fine. But Helen's absolutely right. If you're talking about more severe behavior, then we would expect to see a behavior goal. And certainly, if it's persistent, pervasive behavior, or behavior, even if it's infrequent, but it's extreme behavior where we're looking at, again, sort of that physical or very aggressive behavior, then it's time for you to look at a functional behavior assessment and a behavior intervention plan.
Perfect. Okay, Dee Dee, you want to take this?
Sure. So we've been asked this question multiple times. We know that several districts have, everybody calls it something different, but some districts call it a guided study hall, or an intervention period, or a no new instruction period, or whatever it is. But there's an opportunity during the day for students with disabilities to have a sort of supported study hall, and it's only for students with disabilities. So the question is then, if a student is attending that sort of guided study hall, only with peers with disabilities, do you have to address that in the LRE statement? And does it count towards minutes outside of gen ed? And so, again, this is the basic rule of thumb. If that study hall is not offered to students without disabilities, then yes, you have to capture it in the LRE statement. But make sure that everybody understands that that's not in any way detracting from the fact that the student is in gen ed, and it shouldn't be perceived as a negative. Sometimes what we find is districts are hesitant to include that because they feel like it somehow negates the fact that the student's being taught in an inclusive setting. It doesn't. That's extra above and beyond. So you could state it something kind of like this example we've provided, where Jane receives all academic instruction in a general education classroom with non-disabled peers. In addition, Jane is in a guided study hall with other students with disabilities, where she can receive targeted support for work completion and IEP goals. So yes, you do need to capture it, because it is a separation from non-disabled peers, but it is not in any way taking away from that core instruction that is being received in the gen ed setting. As to the question about, does it count towards the minutes when you're thinking about your reporting in, are they outside of the gen ed classroom, greater than 20% of the day and less than 60% of the day, or more than 80%, your IIE 15, 13, all of those EMIS codes that you use, then yes, obviously it would have to count towards that, because again, it is a separation. But what we want to stress is that yes, you want to capture that in LRE, but don't be at all hesitant to do that, or make sure that your teachers understand that that's in no way perceived as a negative, as a restrictive environment, because the student is still being taught in the gen ed setting with non-disabled peers. This is just a focused time to receive sort of additional support. And it doesn't matter if that's with an intervention specialist or whoever it is that would be leading that. because again, it's specific for students with disabilities. Now, having said that, if you open that up and make the offer so that students who do not have disabilities are also permitted to come into that study hall or that, intervention period or whatever it is that you call it. If students without disabilities have the opportunity to come in, um, at their will, not like when somebody prescribes it for them or something like that, or if it's in any way mixed. I guess even if someone did direct them to go into it, but if it's open to everyone, then even if it is predominantly students with disabilities that are in there, but if the option is there for non-disabled peers to attend that study hall, then no, you do not have to address it in LRE, and you do not have to count it in your calculation for the student's placement and how you code that. But again, if it is not offered to students without disabilities, then yes, you would. So hopefully that's clear for everyone.
And I know some people do that as a possible, well, I don't know that they call it a tutor, but an open session like Dee Dee described. So, we have kids at risk that whoever is in there giving maybe specific attention to some IEP minutes or transition activities or whatever that other students even can benefit from. It is kind of an open session. I know with lack of subs and everything else, that becomes sometimes a little bit difficult, but I do know districts that do have some sort of open session, which really is kind of nice for our other kids that are struggling.
Yeah, great point, Helen. And the question just came up that if you are doing this sort of guided study hall where it is only designated for students with disabilities, then in the location for that, what should you call that? And yes, you would call it a special education study hall, or you could call it, a resource room study hall. But I would make sure that I include the word study hall in that location, just so that it's a clear matchup between your section 7 and your section 11, your LRE statement, so that it's very clear that this isn't for core instruction. It is indeed a study hall, but it is a supported study hall for students with disabilities. So yes, good question about how you would write that under the location of services. But again, I would make sure that I put special education study hall or resource room study hall. I would absolutely include the language study hall so that it doesn't appear that it's a separate instructional classroom.
Dee
So
Dee,
thank you for that.
just I can't see anything in the chat. It only shows the only option I have is you. Not that that makes a lot of difference, but if you want me checking the chat when you're talking, I can't.
Okay, I'm not sure why, so we'll have to look at that separately, but that was the only thing that popped up. So I think we're okay. Okay, Helen, did you want me to do this one?
Yeah, because you've been the person going back and forth, trying to get some state information, and I
Okay.
won't go much farther with that.
Okay. Okay, and I did see that we had someone who said, in terms of, I'm gonna go back here one, just in terms of what you put under location, that they use language at a non-core instructional period. So that's fine too. Like I said, it's also fine to call it a study hall, a special education study hall, a resource room study hall, as long as you're making it clear that it's not an instructional period. So, because again, you want to have that nice matchup between your section 7 and your LRE statement in section 11. So thank you folks for kind of sharing what you do in your district. Okay, so back to the observation. So, we get asked this question a lot about observations required. Are they required for a record review? Or we also get asked all the time, are they required for every reevaluation? And if they are, does the parent have to sign consent for testing, even if though that's not an assessment? Let's talk about parent consent first. So if you are doing a new observation, then yes, you have to have consent. It doesn't matter if it's an assessment or not. What the planning form is looking at is that when we talk about informed consent, is that the parent gave consent for the gathering of new information. And that's what an observation is. It's gathering new information. So it doesn't matter if it's an assessment, it's still gathering new information. And so, yes, the parent would need to give consent for that. However, having said that, let's talk now about, do you have to have a new observation every time you do a reeval or a record review? And the answer to that is no. So I'm going to talk about reevals first, just for free, because it's all sort of in the same package. So let's talk about that. So what you have to do is when you're looking at a reevaluation, and you should be doing this if it's a record review too, because it's the right thing to do. It's the best practice. You need to consider the data that you already have on hand, and that's going to include any observations that you have. If the team agrees that the observation that you've got on hand is still sufficient and it addresses the suspected disability and it can help inform the IEP, then you don't have to do a new evaluation, or excuse me, did not mean to say evaluation. You do not have to do a new observation. So if you're doing that reeval, the observation that you've already got on hand is still relevant, it still serves its purpose, and you don't feel that you need a new observation, you're not looking at, something new that has popped up that wasn't there before, then no, you don't have to do a new observation. Again, you have to consider what you already have on hand and make sure that it does in fact adequately address the area of suspected disability. Now, there are a couple of exceptions to this, and so I want to make sure that we highlight those. You are always required to conduct a new observation in the following cases. If it's an initial identification or a reeval, it doesn't matter. If it's a reeval of a student with a suspected specific learning disability. So for SLD always carries with it the requirement of a new observation. That's only for SLD, not true for any other category. Also, if it's a reeval for a preschool student, you have to do an observation. It doesn't matter what the category is. If they're a preschooler, you're required to do an observation for every reeval. The other time that you should do a new observation is if you're doing a reevaluation, and this would not be a record review, obviously, but if you're doing a reeval and you don't have an observation or observational data that speaks to the suspicion of disability because there's been some change and you might be looking at a new category, so what you have on hand isn't appropriate, then you need to do a new one. So an example would be if you are suspecting eligibility under a new category. So the student was previously identified as SLD, and now you have a suspicion for emotional disturbance. The observation that you had previously and that you have on hand wasn't done with that in mind, and so it's not addressing that. So then it's a good idea to do a new observation because you're looking at a fundamental shift in eligibility category. So, and obviously, again, that would not be a record review, that would be a reevaluation. I just wanted to talk about both since the question came up, and we do get this quite often, so I thought it would be good to address both. Now, let's go back to if it's a record review. If you are doing a straight record review, and you are not doing any new testing, everything's the same, no, you are not required to conduct a new observation. And I'm just gonna check the chat. And okay, another good question. So saying that asking if observations need to be marked as sufficient data available on every ETR and don't put not applicable. And yes, I would, if you've got an observation, I would say that you have sufficient data available because you're going to look at that. When you do a reeval, you're going to look at the existing data that you have and determine if you need something new or if what you have is sufficient. And bear in mind that, again, that if an observation is 3 years old, it doesn't hurt. It's probably a good idea to go ahead and do a new one. But if it really, if there's, nothing has changed, things are very stable, you don't have to. But as a best practice, we would encourage you to at least consider doing a new observation. Again, a record review is different than a reeval. So obviously, we would like to see you do an observation for a reeval, but again, it's not required. And then there's a question of, can the gen ed teacher provide the input for the classroom observation, or does it have to be a psychologist? No, it does not have to be the school psych who does an observation, as long as the person conducting the evaluation understands what to do and is able to do that and should have, guidance and obviously should have some input from your school psych to make sure that that person knows what they're looking for and how to do an observation. An observation, when you're doing a formal observation, that's more than just anecdotal notes. You've got a designated start and stop time. You want to be capturing things. You're looking for the area of suspected disability. So you might be looking for a time off task during that, 15 or 20-minute period that you observed, or whatever it is. So you need to make sure that the person conducting it knows what they're looking for and what information needs to be captured. And then, yes, it's fine for them to do that. There are some districts who utilize psych assistants, and that is not a licensed school psychologist, but it's a person that's in the position to assist the psych, and they conduct all of the observations. They don't do testing because they're not qualified to do that, but they help with a lot of the other clerical aspects to kind of ease the burden on the school psych. And one of the functions that they perform is observations. So yes, it's fine to have someone else do that. And then the question also came up, if they can't obtain consent and you don't have sufficient data, then what? Remember, for a reevaluation, that you can proceed without parental consent if you have done your due diligence to obtain it and you have carefully documented that on your documentation of attempts. Same rule for everything that we always say: try multiple means. Don't say I called 3 times. Make sure that you've tried a variety of ways, up to and including, going to the parent's house. You are not required to do that, but some districts go all out and do, show that they really, really did their due diligence, and that's great. It should be a variety of attempts and multiple attempts to get consent. That's what your documentation of attempts form is for. So you do not have to have consent, but hear what I'm saying. This is the caveat to that. If there's new information that the team wants and you are not able to get consent from the parent, here's what you need to stop and consider. Is the information that you want critical to being able to complete the evaluation and meaningfully inform the IEP? If you can say that, yes, it's really critical, then go ahead and move forward. If it's information that's not really critical, it just would be nice to have, then don't do it. We want to walk a fine line of not proceeding with new testing or new information without parental consent. Even though by law we're allowed to do that, we just want to be careful in practice that we don't abuse that right. So consider, is it critical to what you're doing? Is it critical to determining eligibility? Is it critical to being able to meaningfully inform the IEP? If it is, go ahead. If it's not, I wouldn't do it. Okay, any other questions or comments about that? All right. Okay, Helen, you want to talk a little bit about AA with us?
Sure. Alternate assessment, and we have been getting a few calls about, are we doing a training? And no, we're not doing a training. All anyone new to doing alternate assessment still has to do a training, but all the modules are on the Tide portal under AASCD, and that's where you would direct your teachers or staff to go to be trained. If they're new, we had tried to do some refreshers last year through Zoom, but really nobody, I think we had one person attend from out of region, and there's really not anything at this point that would be a refresher. So what I really wanted to let you know is the testing window, which a lot of people want to know so they can plan ahead of time. It will open on February 23rd and close at 5 on April 21st. And we know this happens, it's a longer window, but we also know that spring break falls in there for most districts. So once again, new test administrators, are required to complete. And like I said, we have had quite a few calls about whether, there's any in-person training. And there is not. The modules are on the Tide portal, and that is what ODE wants completed by new people. You can also send anybody to that for resources and practice tests too. Everything's still on the Tide portal. So if anybody has any questions, please unmute. I can't see the chat.
And I'll also look at the chat, Helen, in case anyone has questions about that.
Or anything in general about alternate assessment,
Right.
since we put it up here.
And before we just open it up for general questions, our colleague Rachel Underkoffer is also on, and I just wanted to give Rachel an opportunity in case there was anything that she wanted to add or address before we open it up for general questions.
I think Rachel's on the phone. I think she's in a meeting too, but yes, if Rachel, you have anything, please join us.
Helen or Dee Dee, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I'm driving in the car actually, everybody, so I apologize if you're hearing noises or sounds. I'm going through construction and people are beeping and there's traffic. But no, I think Dee Dee and Helen covered quite a bit. We have had a lot of questions about observations again. And I know there's a new observation memo that should be coming out. We don't know when that will be released. That is something that is still being tweaked and revised. I know some people heard about that back in September through lots of different channels and different listservs, but that is something that is being revised and clarified. Dee Dee and Helen, I got on a little late, so I'm not sure if you talked about the new prior written notice table that came out recently.
No, we didn't yet. I was just going to share at the end with everybody that we have modules in our Canvas course and talk about the table for prior written.
That's great. Yeah, just for, I know I notified a whole bunch of school psychologists just for anybody who wasn't aware, there's not many changes or anything like that. The table for the prior written notices of when to send it, that sort of thing, when to send the guide to parent rights and special education, that table has been pretty old. It's about 8 years old at this point of what used to be on the website, but now ODE has really tweaked and clarified it, and it looks a lot more user friendly, and it's a lot easier to read when you should be issuing a written notice to under different circumstances. And so that is posted now on the new on the website. So if anybody wants that, we can send that out as a resource. It's also online, like I said, and it's much more thorough this time than the previous table. I think it eliminates a lot of confusion that there might have been. So if people are not aware of when to issue a prior written notice, just know that that table has been revised as of September and is very current and is extremely helpful, in my opinion, as a school psychologist.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Rach.
Rachel. Be careful driving too.
Yes, and thank you for chiming in. And yeah, so that was one other thing that I wanted to mention. As Rachel said, the new chart and document is out. It also includes sort of definitions and explanations for all of the situations when you would give out the PRO1, but it also talks about when you have to do a parent invitation, when you have to get parental consent. So if you have questions about that, those items are included in there as well. And when you have to give the guide to parents' rights. So, and as I said, like Rachel said, it's much more user friendly. We think it's much clearer. They've done a really nice job with it. In addition to the chart itself, then there's a descriptor for each of those sort of situations. So it's really clear. So as Rachel said, you can get it on their website, but I also wanted to let you know that, and we're going to be putting this out as well at our forum coming up, but we have created 2 new modules in our Canvas courses, and they are specifically around prior written notice. So one will be specific to the ETR, and that will be in our Beyond Compliance ETR course. And then the other is specific to IEP, and it will be in our Beyond Compliance IEP course. Those should be live and ready for participants to use next week. So we will again be ready to announce that at forum, but since you guys are on today, I was going to tell you that because I wanted to mention the new PRO1 chart that Rachel brought up. So just so you know, those things will be ready for mass consumption next week. So
Yeah,
at this,
Oh, I just was going to say that chart, and I know I'm old school, but that chart is really great. I'd print it and stick it on my bulletin board. So anyhow, just adding my 2 cents there because it's real handy.
great point, Helen. And I think that we have covered everything that we wanted to address this morning. So we're going to go ahead and open it up to additional questions. If you would prefer that we stop the recording, we can. You just need to let us know that. Otherwise, we'll keep recording because we do have a lot of folks who go back and watch our office hours later. And they sometimes appreciate being able to hear questions that were posed. But again, if it's something of a more sensitive nature and you would prefer we stop the recording, we will. Just let us know. We're special educators, so we have great wait time. So we're going to wait a good another 30 seconds or so. So if you do have a question, you can unmute or you can drop it in the chat, and we'll give a little bit of wait time here before we wrap things up for November.
Well, if there aren't any questions, I hope I waited 30 seconds. I might not have. Sorry. We want to thank you. And I also want to say, since we'll probably see or talk to many of you or email with you before Thanksgiving, but happy Thanksgiving. Since we will not be on office hours until December 7th. And at that time, it'll be 1 p.m. office hours. And make sure, feel free to email us, call us whenever. And if there's specific questions you want addressed in our office hours, email those to us, because usually if one person has a question, many others do too. So it's kind of helpful for us to be able to address it. So many can either hear it when they're on office hours, or like Dee Dee said, when you view the recording.